also you get the NFLPA is going to look into the handling of this. And it just goes back to what we've talked about before. If Tua says he's fine and he's not showing symptoms during the game, what are they supposed to do? Like, yeah. I don't understand why they should be held accountable. It's like you had the outrage the first time around where they had to fire the independent neurologist or whatever that guy's responsibility was. Well, here we are again, and he went out and he finished the game supposedly after he suffered this concussion, but nobody knew anything. Like, they weren't talking about it during the broadcast. They weren't. So the idea that the Dolphins should be responsible and held accountable if this stuff happens, I don't understand that. I don't get how that works.
You know, Mike McDaniel should get a lot more credit for being the one to catch it. He's the one that reportedly told Tua, go see a doctor. They're in a film session together on Monday, and based on Tua's responses to him, he said this is not normal protocol. Usually he's better working through this, talking about this. You need to go see someone. Something's off.
Good. That's not good.
So it's good that at least Mike McDaniel was able to identify it. I know a lot of people weren't, happy with how things went down previously. Obviously, the independent neurologist ends up taking the fall for everyone there. But he does care. He obviously is trying to look out for the best interest of Tua, and it's why they've thrown in the towel on this week's game. Now, next week is really gets interesting because there's a chance Tua's cleared. And I think the question would be, since this is his second concussion, some would say it's his third, right? Because everyone thought the week before the initial concussion took place, he got concussed, right? And that's what led to the outrage in the following week's game where he got knocked out. So some would say he's already had, 3 this year, based on the one that wasn't diagnosed or, he ended up playing after, and now he's gotten 2. So what happens if you have another next week if he's cleared to play? Like, that's the slippery slope that we're on here. You're talking about a player that could end up maybe, deciding that out in the offseason or depending on how things go, like, this isn't worth it. It's not worth all these head injuries for my long-term life down the road. There could even be an issue moving forward. The team can't commit to him, and this isn't to sound crude, but the reality is if he gets one more, maybe he is done, for the rest of his career. So it's a hard spot for all parties to be in, and it's hard for players because – you've got a warrior mentality out there, and as a leader, you want to be out there. He wants to be out there. This is as good a football as Tua's played in his NFL career. He's now got the chance potentially to go to the playoffs, and he's got a coach that loves him and has helped. You don't think he wants to start and play for this team?
Of course.
And do the thing he loves? Like, people think it's an easy decision. It's not. Like, you try to play through other injuries all the time. And so mentally you're thinking, I can play through this too. Even though it is interesting if you go back and I guess the supposed play that caused the concussion, there is a significant drop-off in his play from that point moving forward in the game. So take that for what it's worth in regards to last week's performance. But I just, I think there's a lot on the line for him personally, for the franchise, everything else beyond just this season's goal of getting the playoffs and trying to make a run.
And there's also, people forget that the injury he suffered at Alabama, the hip issue, there was some talk that his career could have been done then. Like, there was no guarantee he was going to be able to come back because of the significance of the injury. So then he works himself back. He becomes a starting quarterback. He's a top 5 pick. And then he's got a coach who basically airs him out in Brian Flores. Finally, he gets somebody who rallies around him. They add pieces around him. Hell yes, he wants to be out there. That's why he hasn't self-reported during these games when he probably should have spoken up and said, "Hey, there's something going on here." So I feel like the Dolphins are kind of in this tough spot because he wants to be out there and he wants to play, and he's already made that choice and come to that understanding as a player. But
who's in the tougher spot, Tua or Miami?
I think Tua is because this decision. Like, if he makes the decision to say, like, I can't come back and play this year because of my personal health, my long-term health, I feel like he's going to feel like everyone's going to hate him. And you know how it is, too. When you're out with an injury, no one cares. No one wants to be around you. Like, everyone's moving on to the next guy. And it's a tough spot to be in personally, especially if, they feel like, hey, look, if you feel like you can go. Like, I feel like he's in a tough spot because he might have to weigh his potential personal well-being over the well-being of the team since, at least based on how things have worked out this season, when he's the starter, they have a chance of winning. Their offense is entirely different.
Well, you guys would know this better than I would. Is he more likely to suffer another concussion if he comes back next week?
Yes.
Or, okay, so then he should probably sit out the rest of the year.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the
Probably.
reasons why you look at why he's able to suffer a concussion this past week. You're more susceptible to it. Once you have one, you're more susceptible to it, especially in that short time frame.
I think he's a sympathetic figure. So if he sits out the rest of the season, I think he's more in jeopardy of losing his job as a quarterback, because I don't know that for the sake of caring about him as a person that you want to go that direction again during the course of an entire season.
I was going to say, do you feel like he's in jeopardy regardless?
Yes. And this makes it even it jeopardizes him way, way more. Because now you're not talking about the merits of his game. You're talking about if I can live with myself, if this guy goes out here and gets hit and it messes him up for the rest of his life.
Well,
like that's something you got to take into consideration.
You asked me that question. Do you feel like the organization's in a tougher spot for that predicament?
I do.
Because if they put him out there and it happens, it's on their watch.
I think they're in a tougher predicament because sometimes you have to protect a guy from themselves. And like, Jonas was saying, like he didn't want to report it. He was ready to play. He wanted to play. Well, what does that look like if he gets out there? He cleared protocol and he gets out there and it's worse than the one we saw that showed up the first time. I just think that puts Mike McDaniel in a tough situation, and probably the toughest for him. It's probably the toughest for him because you have an opportunity to have a good year, and continue it on, and at the same time, the severity of what could happen after having suffered your second concussion. And that's the second concussion that we're speaking of.
Right.
Q, you know for 100% that it ain't two.
Right.
It's not two. There have been more scenarios play out with him than just the two that we know about. So, and whether it's a all the way concussion or whatever it is, you can just tell, like that's not normal to hear somebody say he had to report him or tell him to go see somebody because of the way he's reacting in meetings. That's not good. That's not good. That's not everyday lingo. I could see a guy limping around and be like, bruh, like, go get that checked out. What is it, a hangnail or what? Like, that's different. You see a guy limping around, that's different. But when you're talking about, I can noticeably tell that you need to go get checked out mentally, that ain't good, man. That doesn't sit well. And that is a true dilemma, because where does science of you clearing protocol versus you taking a humanistic approach to how you because sometimes you got to protect your guys. Where is the fine line? He wanted to play. He cleared protocol. We're playing him. Boom. Now he's laying on the ground, and he ain't getting up. Imagine that playing out.
Yeah.
I think that's a pretty compromising position to be in. And I just don't think I would be willing to take that risk. I would look at Tua and be like, bro, you're a sympathetic figure. People love you. Let's just get to the off season. Let's get you as healthy as we possibly can with how you're feeling. Get a plan moving forward and hope for the best. But just know, another concussion on my watch, I can't play you, dog.
Yeah.
That's next season too. I just can't play you.
That means the last two times, if the Dolphins were to make the playoffs, they've had backup quarterbacks starting in the wild card round.
Yeah.